In a moment, we're going to be joined by Jim Lampley, which is a huge thrill for me, as I said, as a longtime watcher of all things sports broadcasting, as someone who went to Newhouse to try and become a sports broadcaster, as someone who was an intern at HBO Sports in 2003 and got to go in the closet and take all the fight posters and T-shirts and sweatshirts, and it was like Christmas Day when I got to go in there, and I've never celebrated Christmas, but you get the point. And who was the soundtrack for 30 years over at HBO Boxing for some of the biggest fights in the history of the Sweet Science. He returns to the scene this Saturday working for payperview.com, and that's ppv.com to be exact. What a great URL that is. ppv.com will be live streaming all the action this Saturday, September 30th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be Saul Canelo Alvarez going up against Jermell Charlo. What a fun fight that is in Las Vegas. The live stream will also feature the return of the great Jim Lampley, who will co-host the viewer chat in real time exclusively for ppv.com viewers. Jim will also be providing daily on-site Fight Week commentary, which has already begun. They had the grand arrivals yesterday in Las Vegas, as well as reports from Las Vegas for ppv's ppv.com's website and social media platforms. So great to have Jim Lampley back on a big fight week. And in a moment, I'll just wait for the word here, we are going to be joined by the Hall of Famer, by one of the greatest boxing, if not the greatest boxing play-by-play voices in the history of the sport. 30 years at HBO, from 1988 to 2018. In fact, the final show that he called for HBO was on December 8th, 2018. Crazy that it's been almost 5 years now. And I don't think anyone could have ever imagined a day where HBO would be out of the boxing business. But the boxing business has evolved. It has changed. It's in a different place now. And there's things like ppv.com live streaming big pay-per-views like Canelo versus Charlo. But it is so great to have Jim back involved in a big fight week. And what a massive honor for this show, and selfishly for myself, as someone who has admired and looked up to Jim and his work and the entire HBO Boxing team's work for all those years, from himself to Larry Merchant, Harold Letterman, George Foreman, Roy Jones, Lennox Lewis, Max Kellerman, the entire team, even the production staff, who I knew quite well as well. A very big thrill for me to say hello to Jim Lampley on this program. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. This is a huge honor, somewhat surreal for me, if I'm being honest, to have you on the program as you lose your AirPod off the bat.
I lost my earpod already.
Yeah.
But I'll put it back in.
It's not.
It was only one. Yeah, it's it's a whirlwind week. After 5 years away from ringside, I'm coming back, and obviously, a lot of people are interested in knowing where have you been for 5 years? What did you do? So I have those conversations. I have conversations again about the fight, which is exciting because it's so much a part of my background and my history in the communications business to be talking about fights. And I think it's a tremendously meaningful fight because Canelo Alvarez is a tremendously meaningful fighter.
All very well said. Are you in Las Vegas right now?
The MGM Grand.
Wow.
My longtime home away from home. Yes, I am.
What is it like for you being there?
Sitting here with all of it outside of me. I have to admit, I've been in Chapel Hill, North Carolina for 5 years. I've been hiding out. I've been teaching at my graceful, stately alma mater. I've been, going to basketball and football games, but other than that, it's the life of an educator. It's relatively sedate. To be back here, Las Vegas last night, to be in the maelstrom of this fight hotel after Canelo arrived about 4 or 5 minutes prior to my walk into the lobby. That was great. Thank you for the cover, Canelo. But the activity, the noise, the lights, it was hallucinogenic. It was really like an acid trip. And I say that as someone who had one or two of those. So I know the experience, and it was really striking to me that this used to be my life. And now I've been sitting in the woods for 5 years, watching deer walk into my backyard, two entirely different worlds.
When you walked into the MGM, as you're taking it in, as you're waking up this morning, is it excitement, sadness, nostalgia? What are the emotions? How would you describe them?
Every one of those, and you could make a longer list. So every emotion that you might associate with something that you did at a prominent level with amazing people over the course of 30 years, and that's inevitably going to put a very deep imprint on your life. I mean, I could go the rest of my days without ever calling a fight, and I'm still a boxing blow-by-blow person. That's where my soul is. I had a genuine kaleidoscope of emotions being here, and I'm very excited to be ringside again Saturday night.
And I'm wondering, have you been back to Las Vegas since you stopped calling fights, or is this your first time?
Not once.
Wow.
This is it.
Wow.
This is the return. I've been to New York. I have grandchildren there. I've been to other places that are more hectic and more fast-paced than Chapel Hill. But 95% of the time since I moved to North Carolina in late 2019, I've been in Chapel Hill, surrounded by pine trees and evergreens, and breathing in the peace and quiet of a university campus.
Wow, that is fascinating. Do you remember? So your last show that you called HBO Boxing for was December 8th, 2018. Do you remember the day that you found out that HBO was going to get out of the boxing business? Where were you? What was that phone call like?
I heard rumors, but I was resistant to them. I just couldn't believe that the incoming owners would make that particular decision. That was not exactly a failing element of HBO programming. That was a vital, enduring, essential that a huge percentage of our viewer base associated with HBO and wanted to see continued. But the new owners made their own decision. I was at, and I can't remember whether it was the post-Emmy Awards party or the post-Golden Globe Awards party at a hotel in Beverly Hills. I was at the table of our beloved HBO chairman, Richard Plepler. He encouraged me to go meet a guy named John Stankey, who was the incoming chief executive of AT&T. I went over and had about a 15-minute conversation with Stankey and his wife at Richard's behest. And I went back to the table and said, this is going to go away. They're not interested. And that was not an overwhelmingly favorable reception, in my view. They were nice, but it was not as though they looked at me as a meaningful part of the franchise going forward. So it became clear on that evening. And Richard said, I won't speak for them. We'll see what happens. So it happened. And they walked away from boxing. And, I sort of expected that another play-by-play, blow-by-blow opportunity might arise, but it didn't. Everybody had competent blow-by-blow people doing the job for them. Those people are my friends. I support them. I'm happy for them. I've always been aware all through my long television career, 40 plus years, that whenever I got a good job, someone else probably lost one. And that was not always a comfortable or peaceful feeling. So if there's a silver lining in not having gotten any ringside gig since the time that I was dislodged along with the rest of HBO, it is that nobody wound up with a discomforting circumstance in their own life just because I was available. That's fine with me. That's good. on to what comes next. And what comes next is a different form of communicating with the audience. A lot of what I taught in my course at the University of North Carolina, Evolution of Storytelling in American Electronic News Media, was about how changes in the wake of technological change, business change, personnel change, audience composition change, et cetera, et cetera. All those things are constantly massaging a process that changes as it goes forward. This is something new in boxing. This is a chance for the people at home to share in a conversation with Lance Pugmire and me. And I am excited about being a part of a new form of communication on ppv.com.
And I want to talk about the future and what you thought the future was going to be. But if I could just, trying to go in chronological, just curious about that December 8th broadcast. Do you remember what the emotions were like throughout the night, throughout the day, and then the night, and then when you were coming to the realization that there were just minutes left as you had to, sign off? And, most great broadcasters don't try to prepare things. And I know some of your greatest calls weren't prepared, but to sign off for the last time, what were the emotions when you were doing that?
Well, I wish I could control my emotions better than I do. I wish I could put on a blank face for moments like that, but that's not me. Never has been. So, with regard to a lot of different things, it was profoundly emotional. Roy and Max are two of the closest friends I've ever had. The people in the truck are among the closest friends I've ever had. The audio man at ringside is someone I love from years of working together. And I had a daughter who lived in Los Angeles, still does. And I'd arranged for my daughter and her husband to come to the fight. And at first they were seated across the ring from me. I could see them, but they were not near me. And somewhere during the fight, I realized, well, they're not seated there anymore. I don't know where they are. And my wife had arranged somehow that my adult daughter was brought around and put in the chair in the first row directly behind me, so that when I stood up from the table to turn toward the camera and do that on camera, the first face I saw was her. And she's about the same age as the duration I had covering boxing for HBO. So everything about that moment of impending loss washed over me at that time. And as you can see, I can still feel it. There's a direct emotional connection to an extremely emotional sport. There's a direct emotional connection to all the people at ringside, all the fighters with whom I would spend 30 minutes to a half hour, 30 minutes to an hour the day before the fight, in almost every instance, getting to know them in a way that very few people have the privilege of doing. All those things were a part of that experience. And I think that Max and Roy were both just as deeply emotional as I was. They probably controlled it better. Again, that's not me. Viewers were by that time quite accustomed to seeing Lampley tear up from time to time, and Lampley teared up again. And then we got off the air.
And so, I'm sorry for making you emotional, and it's obviously not my intention, but I appreciate the emotion, and I appreciate how much it all meant to you. It's a mourning period, right? This was your life, and you are so beloved. Do you feel as though you are over that loss, or is the pain still there? Is the heartbreak still very apparent in your life?
Heartbreak still apparent, pain still there. Not because I lost anything that I desperately need. Everything comes to an end, and I was always aware. I was never unaware that this was like every other meaningful broadcasting job that I had, in that at some point there would be an ending point. But the ending point came before we anticipated it was going to come. And I was not ready and prepared for that. It didn't make any sense to me that new owner of HBO would not be interested in continuing the franchise. But they had their own view, they had their own ideas, and obviously they bought the company, so they were entitled to that. But the personal connections, the friendships, this is a uniquely intimate sport. You're not talking to 47 football players the day before the game. You're talking to one guy, by and large, and yes, on a card, 3 or 4 different fights. But the bottom line is very intimate, very personal. The fighters tend to share information with you in a deeper, more personal way than is the case with a lot of other athletes. It was always that way to me. When I was a child in Hendersonville, North Carolina, I was 11 years old when my mother turned on the Rome Olympics to introduce me to Cassius Clay. She said to me, this is your perfect hero. Everything about him embodies the things that I want you to care about and believe in, most especially anti-racism. And so Cassius Clay, later Muhammad Ali, became a heroic icon in my life, more important, more meaningful than any other. And I know that I am one among many millions of people, tens of millions of people around the planet for whom that was the case. The young viewers that we have, the listeners that we have today, who are 17, 18, they can't imagine. They can't really connect to what a meaningful figure he was, and how his life touched so many lives around the globe. And I was definitely one of them. In fact, you'll appreciate this. Sometimes people have asked me, what do you think is the best line ever, in one of your telecasts, or what's the best thing George ever said, or Max ever said, or Roy ever said, et cetera, et cetera. And I always say, I witnessed the greatest line of boxing commentary ever, and it can never be touched. It can never be surpassed. And that was in a conference room at ABC in New York in 1980, the night that Larry Holmes fought Muhammad Ali. And that was a rite of passage, a ritual that has to take place in the sport. There was no way that it wasn't going to take place. Everybody knew what the outcome of the fight was going to be, and everybody knew what that outcome meant to the story of Muhammad Ali. And in about the 9th or 10th round, as Holmes was delivering the beatdown and going through with his professional responsibility as Ali's former sparring partner, who loved him, having to beat up his hero and wipe away once and for all his reign as the heavyweight champion. And I'm in a small suite of people watching the fight with celebrities, and I felt a little poke in my ribcage, and I looked over, and it was Mick Jagger.
Wow.
And Jagger said, "Lamps, do you know what we're watching here?" And I said, "No, Mick, what are we watching?" He said, "It's the end of our youth." That's the greatest line of boxing commentary ever. The end of our youth. And that was so true for generations of Americans. And of course, Holmes went ahead and did his duty, and the fight was stopped, and our youth was over, as Mick said. So one of the things I owe to boxing and love about boxing is just being able to have memories like that, to curate them and to share them with people like you.
When you signed off in December of 2018, in the back of your mind, did you think, all right, maybe I'll be out of the game for a few months, but I'll surely pick up the work with someone else? Did you think that this would continue, or was there a part of you that was afraid that you had just called your last live fight?
Eliminate surely, because nothing is ever sure in this business. Okay, tomorrow isn't sure.
Right.
So I didn't have any surety about anything. I thought that there were a couple of possibilities. Number one, that immediately one of the streaming services or some other network or somebody would come to me and say, "All right, we want you to come and do blow by blow for us." And there would be a fun negotiation, and we would achieve a price, and I would go to work for somebody else calling fights. That was one possibility. The other possibility I saw in my mind was, I'm 69 at this moment. Next year I'll be 70. Maybe there is no continuing market here. Maybe I have called my last fight just because the passage of time and the natural cycles of life dictate that I've called my last fight. As it turned out, that was more or less the case. I did get one offer from Triller to call Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos. Lopez got sick with COVID. At least that's my memory of what happened. That went away. And I have not called blow by blow on another fight since December 8, 2018.
It a little bit blows my mind, and I understand what you were saying earlier. Everyone has their guy, and it's great that they all kept their jobs and there was no drama or controversy, but you are Jim Lampley. You are the voice of our generation. You are the soundtrack of HBO Boxing. How has there never been an opportunity, whether it's maybe for Olympic boxing for 2 weeks in the summertime, or being, an internet, like there's never been a great offer other than the Triller offer that you just spoke of, and I've heard you talk about that as well. Nothing for Jim Lampley? Like, that has always blown my mind.
Well, my agent, simultaneous to the dissolution of the boxing telecast, my very great agent, who was the most important sports agent at CAA, left the agency business to go to work for Vince McMahon and engineer the sale of McMahon's enterprise WWE to UFC for a great deal of money. So he was no longer in my life, and therefore I didn't have that particular force looking for an employment opportunity. I never replaced him with another agent. I accepted that, okay, whatever, people know who I am. Whatever happens is going to happen. If somebody wants me, they'll come to me. Then I can decide how to be representative such a conversation is going to take place. And if they don't want me, they don't want me. At the end of the day, the Triller thing went away. There was no other offer. I was deeply immersed teaching my course at UNC, and all that stayed in place until PPV.com, a woman named Dale Hopkins, contacted me to ask if I was interested in doing this kind of thing, this new communicative form with my good friend Lance Pugmire at this particular fight. And I wanted to come to this fight. This is a tremendously meaningful fight because Canelo is he's the former pound for pound #1 fighter in the sport. He's the dollar for dollar leader in the sport because he's the #1 Mexican fighter. And he's an enormously proud guy. I covered a lot of his career, and I understand who he is and what it is he wants to put back in his life by winning this fight and going forward from it. But it's danger. This is a fight that he can lose. So it's one of those big rites of passage in boxing. Is Canelo going to get a chance to reestablish himself as Canelo Alvarez, the #1 Mexican fighter and the #1 pound for pound attraction in boxing, or is he going to be surpassed by someone who might himself be the one to then build toward trying to get a Terrence Crawford matchup? Terrence Crawford's name and image hang over this fight now because he is very definitively pound for pound #1. He stated his case. It was a compelling case. So if you're Canelo Alvarez and you've been pound for pound #1 in the past and you would like to retire that way, that enterprise goes through Omaha, Nebraska now. So how does he set up a negotiation, a discussion with Crawford that gives him a chance to again become #1 pound for pound? He has to win Saturday night. And he has to win in a positive way that makes the audience care about whether he can get back to the horizons he wants. And
I love the way you break that all down. Again, it's surreal for me to have this conversation with you, and I want to ask you about all of that in a moment. But actually, you would appreciate this as a broadcaster. Your audio has changed dramatically, and I think it's because your AirPods may have gone out. Is it possible to put them? I don't know, put them back in and then because now it sounds like it's coming through the computer as opposed to your AirPods.
Okay, AirPods out.
Oh, now it's much better.
Earpods. Whoops.
Oh,
earpod. Now, listen.
This is good.
I'm the world's worst I'm the world's worst audio engineer.
No, I know.
I worked for
But I want you to sound good.
5 years at HBO with a fantastic audio man named Paul Hoggett, and we still grieve his passing every day. All right, now the earbuds are back in.
Okay.
How are we doing?
No, much better. This is how you sounded at the beginning. So I just wanted it was bothering me, and I want you to sound as good as possible. So thank
Sorry
you.
that I bothered you.
No. The audio call. I want you to sound as good as possible. It's amazing to hear you break down, the state of the game and everything. So you're still very much up to speed. But I'm just wondering, in the aftermath of HBO closing its doors on boxing, 2019, 2020, did you need a break from the sport? Did you watch it as much, or because the pain was?
I would have called a fight the next day.
Really?
Never need a break from. I would have called a fight the following day or 3 days later. Break from boxing, crazy. It's too much a part of my life. And my wife loves to point out, and she's right, that at about 85% of my personal stories, if you're going to begin at the beginning, actually begin with the words, "My father died when I was 5 years old." My father died when I was 5 years old. The very first sports event my mother ever sat me down to watch. And she very assertively sat me down and said, "Watch this, because if your father was still alive, this is what you'd be doing." I was 6 years old. It was 1955. It was Sugar Ray Robinson versus Bobo Olson for the middleweight championship of the world, their second fight on Gillette Friday Night Fights. And before my mother left me in the room she said, "In the next
60 to 90 minutes, a man named Don Dunphy is going to teach you everything you need to know about boxing." And that's what began this romance. And I spent the first 13 years of my broadcasting career at ABC Sports. I wouldn't have mentioned the word boxing in the building. Cosell did boxing. I didn't want to get beheaded. And I wound up getting assigned to boxing at ABC after Cosell had left it behind, by a new sports division boss who wanted to get rid of me and who thought that by assigning me to boxing, he could hasten and accelerate my departure from that network, because I would be allergic to boxing and boxing would be allergic to me. He didn't know. He didn't know anything about me. He didn't know that I had saved lawn mowing and car washing money in Miami for 13 months to buy a ticket to Sonny Liston versus Cassius Clay, February 25, 1964 in Miami Beach. That had been the first prize fight I ever attended live. He didn't know any of that. He thought that I was a non-boxing person, and he assigned me to call fights. And the first several fights I called on ABC were the early television network exposures of Mike Tyson, a 19-year-old heavyweight from upstate New York who was about to take over not just the sport of boxing, but the entire media world. And for a while, I was his blow-by-blow biographer. So, there are a lot of moments within my arc in boxing which are absolutely destiny-based. Couldn't have been any other way. This was meant to be. And for somebody to assign me to it to try to get rid of me is hysterical in retrospect, but it happened.
And by the way, every time you say "it happened" in your familiar voice, I'm brought back to George Foreman. I'm sure you know this and have heard this before. It's an amazing thing that those two words are so closely linked to you and your voice. I was just talking about something earlier in the program, and you telling that story reminded me of what I was just talking about. You probably don't know this, but I was an intern at HBO Sports in 2003, and I primarily worked on Real Sports with Brian Gumbel. I got to work on a story, and I know you've worked in the past as a correspondent on that show. And last year, I was named a correspondent on Real Sports, and I just finished up what will probably be my last story, because that show is coming to an end at the end of this year as well, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, they're dumping out on that too, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Heartbreaking for all of us.
I won two best sports reporting Emmys for stories that I did on Real Sports. So I was grateful that it existed and grateful that I was able to go out and do very meaningful stories under that umbrella and interact with Brian, who was a great and old friend.
And so when I sit in the chair, I'm relatively new to that world. I feel sometimes like I'm dealing with imposter syndrome. I'm not you. I'm not Bernie Goldberg. I'm not Brian Gumbel. I'm not Soledad O'Brien. I'm not these. And so I'm wondering.
Frank DeFord.
Frank
Don't
DeFord,
leave
of
out
course.
Frank DeFord.
The absolute legend,
yeah.
yes.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, when you were sitting in that chair in 1988, and that was Howard Cosell's chair, did you deal with that as well? Did you struggle with, like, should I be here? Am I the guy to do this? And if so, how did you get over that?
Totally. And I got over it very quickly because I had a wonderful, amazing expert commentator colleague, a guy named Alex Wallow, and he was new to the telecast at the same moment that I was new to the telecast, but he had been the in-house executive at ABC Sports who was in charge of buying the rights to the boxing matches. He was the boxing mole. All the other sports, other people could do that. Generalists could do that. It had to be a boxing specific guy to do boxing, and Alex was the guy. And he also became my expert commentator on the telecast. Now, understand, the new boss was trying to get rid of both of us. So Alex was trying to strengthen the broadcast in such a way that we could stick around within the umbrella of ABC Sports. We lived 5 blocks apart on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And he got me to agree that 2 or 3 days a week, I would walk from my apartment up to his apartment on Fifth Avenue. And we would sit down with videotape, and he taught me all of the tiny intricacies of boxing, the things that he could teach me that I did not previously know. Look at how the body puncher clamps down on the opponent's punching arm and holds it away from the referee so that the referee can't see it. Look at how he gets in 5 or 6 rib shots on the other side while he's doing that. He taught me all of these things that, I watched a whole lot of boxing, but I didn't have enough detail to know the things that Alex knew. And he schooled me during the first several fights that I called on ABC. And of course, a lot of them were with a 19-year-old developmental heavyweight from upstate New York, whose name was Mike Tyson. So within a relatively short period of time, less than a year after I first started calling fights, I was covering the biggest cultural phenomenon in the Western world at close range. It was amazing.
Did you have a relationship of any kind with Howard Cosell?
That's a long story. The answer is yes. And when you say of any kind, yeah, it was of any kind. Yes, I was his star field reporter on his last magazine show venture at ABC, a show called Sports Beat. Sports Beat with Howard Cosell. Sports Beat with Howard Cosell was a Saturday afternoon enterprise on ABC, on which Cosell would do, almost always, in almost every instance, a live studio interview with one of 4 people: Louis Kuhn, Sonny Werblin, George Steinbrenner, or Al Davis. Every week, the guest was going to be one of those 4, and Howard was going to be covering some institutional controversial issue relative to sports that only he knew about because he had the relationships with these guys. I was the person who had to get on a plane and go out and fly somewhere in the country or the world and put together a feature story to amplify what he was doing on Sports Beat. And the beautiful part of that was that I had an office on the 12th floor at ABC, about 30 feet away from where Howard's office was and where he had 3 secretaries seated out front. And I would go in and spend a few hours almost every weekday in that office. And Howard would walk out of his office and stand twiddling a cigar, looking at the secretaries, and in a loud voice, so that I was sure to hear it, it's a travesty. It's an absolute atrocity. It's an insult to the entire business. Hired, promoted, he's a sophomore. He has no fundamental experience whatsoever in the important elements of the world, the kinds of things that I do. Could he do an interview with Sonny Werblin? Absolutely not. Always talking about me, right?
Wow.
And then an hour later, or an hour and a half later, he would come out and say, the kid, Lampley, is the only other on-air personality here who's capable of completing a complete sentence under pressure. He is far more literate and advanced in his intelligent usage of the English language than all of these other cretins who are working with me on Monday Night Football or whatever. And that's why he's our reporter on this show. And then he was writing all of his books, and he would keep the galleys for the books in his desk. And I would get a little buzz from one of the secretaries. Howard needs to see you in his office right now. Howard needs to see you in his office right now meant that Howard had finished writing some section for the next book, and now he wanted to hear me praise it. So I would go into his office. He would read me the galley out of his desk. I would say, "Oh my gosh, Howard, that's amazing. That's so profound. That is, a vast exhibition of knowledge that nobody else in the business can provide. I'm just so privileged to have a chance to hear you read that to me. Yes, now go away. I don't need you anymore." It was always my job to hear the galleys, tell them how great they were, and keep the process moving forward toward the book, whatever it was.
Wow. Okay. That is a relationship of some kind.
Oh, and once I was doing the boxing, once I was the blow-by-blow boxing person,
Yeah.
and his mild distaste for me further developed into advanced mortal hatred.
Oh, wow. Really?
And after it was all over, I called him on the phone, and I learned and discovered that he absolutely hated my guts.
Why? He felt like you were taking his gig?
It was always going to be his gig, right?
Right.
I mean, he was Howard Cosell. He had the Muhammad Ali thing on the air. He was unique as far as he was concerned. And how could a preppy imitator like me be even remotely considerable to put into the same sentence? It was a travesty. It was a joke. It was an atrocity. But I understood. I knew who he was, and I learned from it. I learned, among other things, what it was I didn't want to be.
Why did you decide to move to North Carolina in 2019?
I always had. I was a master's degree candidate in the radio, television, motion pictures department at the University of North Carolina at the moment in 1974, when I was chosen out of an absurd nationwide talent hunt, along with another person from Stanford named Don Tollefson. I was chosen to be one of the first two people ever to stand on the sideline of a football game with a camera and a microphone. And I wound up being on the sideline of ABC Sports College football for 3 years, and that became the launching pad for my broadcast career. And the net result of all that, the travel, the work, the metamorphosis in network television was that I never ever wrote my planned master's degree thesis for the radio television master's degree program. I never got the thesis written, so I never actually got the master's degree on which I had been bearing down at that point. So as a compensation to myself, as a kind of makeup on that, I decided that it would be a great ambition for me to go back and teach, go back at some point and actually teach in the communications graduate school. That would be an affirmation that even though I didn't write the thesis and didn't get the master's degree, I was still valuable. The chancellor agreed with me. The chancellor was born on my birthday, so he shares his birthday with me, and I educated him to understand that also means he shares his birthday with Gennady and Max Golovkin, who are also born. All of us are born on April 8th. But the chancellor had put in place and made clear to me, you have a permanent invitation. Anytime you want, you can come back and teach in the communication school. And I did. I went back because I wanted to be back on the campus where I went to both graduate school and undergraduate school. I wanted to see the trees again. UNC is a cult, all right? It's not just a university. It's an extreme emotional cult, and almost everybody comes back in some way, shape, or form. And hey, I had done the Dean Smith show. I had done the Bill Dooley show. I had a lot of connections in Chapel Hill, which are indelible and lifelong. So we moved from Del Mar, California. We went to Chapel Hill. We weren't planning to stay there. COVID hit, and we're still there.
Do these students know who you are? Do you get the sense that they understand who you are?
Some of them.
And some have no idea.
Some of them. Some had no idea.
Wow.
Absolutely right.
Does that bother you?
Some of them had zero idea whatsoever. No. It was probably better in some way for teaching. After all, I'm teaching a course about news story evolution. I'm teaching a course about the effect of the news ecosystem on our political atmosphere. I'm teaching a course that has real, legitimate meaning. It's not just about who's the best fighter in the world. So it was probably better for my credibility in teaching that course that it was just me, my voice, the things that I said in the classroom, and they're not looking at Google and saying, hey, wait a minute, this guy's a boxing announcer. Why is he teaching me this course? That particular contradiction never came up.
And so to that point, here you are coming back and you're very much a story this week, right? And I'm sure when you go to the media, availabilities, intent, and all that stuff, there's going to be a lot of questions about you. And we're sort of taught to not be the story, right? Your whole career has been based off telling other people's stories. Are you comfortable with all of this? Are you comfortable with having this spotlight on you this week?
Yes. It's one time only. It's a unique circumstance. I'm a story thinker, and the story makes sense. The story makes sense in terms of all the questions that you are asking and advancing the narrative. I don't deny that all that is logical, and obviously I'm flattered. I'm flattered that anybody cares. I'm flattered that the discussion is relevant to people's perceptions of the sport and of me. So I'm comfortable with it. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to do it in conversations with people like you, who are intelligent enough, broad-minded enough, have enough knowledge to understand exactly where I fit, where this story that we're talking about fits in the ongoing evolution of media's relation to both boxing and sports, and just glad to have a moment in which to distribute my voice. This
gig, this opportunity with ppv.com, is this a one-off, or will you be doing several fights with them?
I don't know. That I think remains to be seen. Question one is, I'm going to do this Saturday. I have not done it before. Am I of any value to them? Do they perceive that I have helped, or does Lance like working with me? He's there ahead of me. He's first here. Do the viewers get something out of it? That's question one. Let's see how that goes. Question two is, do I like it, and is it a satisfying way to communicate about fights? I think that's probably going to be the case. I'm not the world's fastest typist. They're probably going to give me some keyboard help. But I'm comfortable with every element of this. I'm comfortable that I'm part of the story. I'm comfortable that I'm getting a chance to talk with so many people like you. I'm comfortable with working with Lance. I'm comfortable that I'm going to try a new form of communication with ppv.com. And I'm comfortable with the idea that whatever happens next is another discussion that follows this Saturday night.
Are you still open to the idea of broadcasting fights, or have you moved on from that? If someone came to you this weekend, you would still be open to the conversation?
Yes, I would absolutely be open to the conversation. I haven't moved on from anything. So there's no move on. It's here we are at the fight. I think I still understand what I'm watching. I think I still know some things about these people and how they work. And let's see how ppv.com does, and where could that lead? They're first up. Even if HBO was suddenly reconstituted and came back to life, and a bunch of AT&T executives came banging on my door saying, we want you back. I say, I have to talk to PPV.com first. Mm-hmm. They came to the table. Mm-hmm. They created this opportunity. So let's see how this goes, and then we'll figure out what happens next.
How do you feel about the current state of boxing? I tend to feel like boxing is enjoying a tremendous year. There's obviously some new faces since you last called a fight. The Eddie Hearns and Matchrooms of the world, some new stars, right? I know Terrence Crawford was just kind of getting going when you last called the fight. Now here he is, pound for pound number one. You have the Naoya Inoue's of the world, the Usyks of the world, Fury doing his thing. The current state of the business and the sport, how do you feel about it?
I don't see how any boxing fan at this moment could be dissatisfied with the level of narrative interest, the number of interesting stories, the number of interesting people, the number of high-quality, historically significant fighters that they're looking at in the ring. I don't see how any fan could say, boxing's dead, there's nothing there. That isn't the case. We have a great new pound-for-pound king who reminds me in a lot of ways of Sugar Ray Robinson. He's not as balletic as Robinson, but he's the first I've seen since Robinson who can consistently balance himself out and create position for a counterpunch that develops murderous power. You know, there aren't too many counterpunchers who can create the kind of power that Crawford creates. And so he's really good and he's meaningful. On the other hand, would you give Canelo a chance to beat him? I think most people would have to say, oh, yeah, Canelo's naturally the larger guy, and he has a lot more experience in big fights. Maybe Canelo could beat Terrence Crawford. That would make him number one, pound for pound again. And then there are other fighters who are knocking on the door. How could anybody be better than Naoya Inoue, a tremendous fighter? And oh, by the way, I remember very vividly a dinner here at the MGM Grand, where I am right now, with Emanuel Stewart, probably 11, 12 years ago. Not too terribly long before Emanuel died. We were eating at the House of Blues. And I said, Emanuel, I've heard that you have had Tyson Fury in your gym and that you've done some work with Tyson Fury. And he said, yes, Jimbo, I have. Emanuel's the closest male friend I ever had. I said, Emanuel, why would you be interested in Fury? To me, he looks like a big, clumsy oaf who has trouble getting out of his own way. And Emanuel put down his fork and looked down at his plate, looked up at me with that wide-eyed expression that he would sometimes feature and said, Jimbo, he's going to be the heavyweight champion of the world, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. And not only is he going to be the heavyweight champion of the world, but he might turn out to be an unbeaten and unbeatable heavyweight champion of the world. Look at him now.
Wow.
Look at who he is and consider that Emanuel said that to me at a moment when I was saying, how can you say that? And he had reasons. He saw things. He made clear to me why he thought Fury could turn out to be unbeatable. And one of the fun conversations I love to have with boxing people now is, okay, looking at him realistically for who he is. Look at the 6'9" of it all, or who knows, maybe taller and longer. Look at how the arms are longer even than the height profile. Look at how his first instinct in the ring is always the backup counterpuncher instinct. He's there, first of all, to protect himself and not make a mistake. And now that he's learned how to put weight behind his punches going forward, look at what a dominating power puncher he is. Given all that, who in history would you pick to beat him? All right? Who had the size envelope and the talents and all the things that it would take to beat Tyson Fury? The answer is I usually get mostly from boxing experts are Lennox Lewis and Muhammad Ali. Okay, I can get it. I see it. But weren't there some things that they might have trouble with that this guy does? I think he is a really fascinating conversation. And he's that rare heavyweight champion who actually belongs in the top 5 pound for pound discussion. And with a few more wins could actually get to number 1 pound for pound. He's amazing.
2 last quick questions, if I may. Later on today, on this show, we have a young man named Logan Paul appearing on the show, and he is one of the faces of this influencer boxing world. He has a big fight coming up on October 14th. There's a big card as well. This wasn't really a thing when you last called a fight for HBO Boxing. Are you aware of it? Are you interested in it? Do you like it? Do you hate it?
I'm aware of it. I have not yet been interested enough in it to sample it. I can't say that I've watched or seen these events and these people. They have spectacular marketing and business sense. Spectacular. They've made a great deal of money operating outside the ordained envelope of boxing and boxing business. And I could foresee them continuing to do that. There's a flaw in my DNA here, which is that I have never paid attention to MMA, don't understand MMA. When I was asked by Triller to call Belfort against Holyfield, I said that would be dishonest. That would be a low integrity move because, frankly, I know less about MMA than almost anybody in that audience. So it's not fair for me to take it upon myself to call such an event. And I don't know how much it's important to know MMA to fully understand what the Pauls are doing. But again, I like fighters, fight narratives, stories that can be told. I think I'm qualified to tell them. If somebody from an organization like that wanted to speak to me this weekend when I'm not immediately concerned with something to do with ppv.com or in the future, bound to say yes to a conversation. I love meeting new people.
Fair enough. I've heard people ask you what your favorite fight to call was, and I've heard you say that it's impossible to answer that question. I'm just wondering if I could ask the question perhaps in a different way. Do you have a favorite telecast, beginning to end? You take off the headset at the end of the night and you say that was perfect. That was when I was the happiest. That's the one that will stick with me until my last days. Is there one that it all just felt like it came together and was magic on that night?
I'm deeply conditioned to say that no telecast is ever perfect. But there are two which are very satisfying to me in the way that they turned out. And very appropriately for somebody whose first live prize fight was Sonny Liston versus Cassius Clay, they are both heavyweight championship fights. Because let's face it, there's something different at stake when you're calling a heavyweight championship fight. So Tyson Douglas, seen by many as the successor to Liston Clay, is the biggest upset in the history of boxing. The whole event from start to finish, the 11 a.m. Tokyo time, 34,000 people in Korakuen Stadium making not a sound. You could have heard a pin drop. You could hear Mike and Buster's shoes slapping against the canvas in the first round. It was the most unusual atmosphere ever for a prize fight. And we get late in the fight, and not terribly shocking to me because I had paid attention to what was happening between Mike and bigger men. He went the distance with Mitch Blood Green. He went the distance with Tony Tucker. He went to the last 10 seconds with Jose Rebalta. All those guys bore some things in common with Douglas, but Douglas was the best athlete of the group. And now we're in the closing rounds of what has now become a beatdown, and for which the outcome is seemingly increasingly obvious. And Buster lands the 4-punch combination in the 10th, and Tyson goes down. And as the referee's counting to 10, I'm conscious that, okay, whatever I say, whatever it is, it's going to be a very memorable call in boxing history, and maybe the most memorable call in boxing history. And I was developing at that time a close friendship with the greatest actor of my generation, Jack Nicholson. And I had asked Jack a couple times, I said, Jack, when you're getting ready to film the most important scene in the movie, the fulcrum, the thing on which the whole movie turns, what do you keep in your mind? He said, very easy, Lamp. First thing I've thought ever since I went to acting class, don't overact. And as I got ready to try to fashion a closing comment for Tyson Douglas, I heard Jack's voice saying, don't overact. And that's how that became Mike Tyson has been knocked out.
Wow.
It was the simplest, most prosaic, most straight fact way of saying what that picture was in front of us. Mike Tyson has been knocked out. Leave that alone. And that's definitely one of my best and most appropriate calls. The other one, not surprising to you, you touched on it earlier. The night that my broadcast expert commentator, George Foreman, defeated Michael Moore to win the heavyweight championship of the world at age 45, oldest man ever to win the title. George is a unique personality. We had become friendly and understood each other working together on that broadcast. But we had done several fights together in the build-up to the Moore fight. And I had taken the liberty several times, crew meals, breaks in the rehearsal, etc., to kind of buttonhole George and say, big guy, what exactly are you going to do to beat Moore? He's a southpaw. He's a mover. That he's a uniquely elusive kind of heavyweight. Holyfield couldn't find him, and Holyfield has much better feet than yours. What are you going to do to reel this guy in and beat him? And George said to me, might have been 3 times, might have been 4 times, might have been 6, but the words were always the same. Jim, you watch. There will come a moment late in the fight when he will come and stand in front of me and let me knock him out. Look at the video. He will come and stand in front of me and let me knock him out. How could that happen? It's right there. So as it happens, and as the referee's counting him out, I hear George in my head saying, you watch. There will come a moment. And what comes out of my mouth as a reflex is, it happened. It happened. I was talking to George. What happened was what he had told me had happened. So the audience couldn't possibly get the entire import and meaning of what that was. But that was an impulse. That was a spontaneous call that came out of my mouth when I was thinking, why didn't I plan for this? Why didn't I have any chance of doing this? Why didn't I have a prefabricated line? And what comes out is, it happened, it happened. Definitely my best call. Definitely the most appropriate way to button a prize fight that I've ever come up with in my career.
Unbelievable. Thank you for these stories, Jim. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope the ppv.com gig goes great. If I could just throw out this suggestion, I can listen to you, and I'm sure I'm speaking for a lot of people when I say I can listen to you tell these stories for hours. I'm not going to keep you much longer, but perhaps an idea, and maybe you've thought of it, of a weekly show, a monthly podcast, something of you just telling us these stories. I would eat that up, and I know a lot of people would eat that up. I just need to hear you. Maybe a guest, a friend or two joins you, but perhaps something to ponder during your free time in North Carolina, because these stories to me are priceless. They're absolute gold. I'm so happy to see you back on the scene, and happy that you've teamed up with the great people at ppv.com who I've met, who are fantastic human beings, and it gives me great joy as we continue to get older and the sport evolves, that they recognize what you bring to the table and how important you are to the fans. I'll be watching on Saturday via ppv.com so I can watch your commentary on the screen. I can't wait to see it and experience it.
Well, I love them, and this has been a really, really fun experience. So thank you very much. Call back anytime. All right?
Thank you so much. All the best to you. There he is.
All right.
The great Jim Lampley. Wow. What an interview. I mean, nothing to do with me there. What stories, what a legend, what emotion. And I really, really appreciate him doing that. And I appreciate the good people at ppv.com for helping set that up. Thank you very much to legendary boxing PR man Fred Sternberg for setting that up as well. Again, ppv.com will be live streaming all the action this Saturday, September 30th at 8 p.m. The live stream will feature the return of the great Jim Lampley, along with Lance Pugmire. They will co-host the viewer chat in real time exclusively for ppv.com. And so you watch this, there's the chat. It's a great way to experience it in a different way. That's how I'll be watching Canelo Charlo. And as I mentioned earlier, Jim will also be providing daily on-site fight week commentary and reports from Las Vegas for ppv.com's website and social media platforms. That is emotional stuff, guys. It's emotional to see a legend like that get so emotional about fight stories, experiences, and part of my takeaway is, the wound of HBO closing its doors on boxing still seems very, very fresh. And reciting some of this probably gives him great joy, but also some pain as well. As he said, he used the term a kaleidoscope of emotions. What a vocabulary! What a voice! What a presence! Just an absolute legend. I mean, that I would go to a place called Jilly's in Montreal and to Carey Square. I would watch the boxing pay-per-views. Sometimes we would order them when they were just on HBO. I would sit there and watch, and that imposter syndrome that I've talked about, like, getting to work some of these fights, and I've worked a handful of them, sitting there and thinking, this is where Jim Lampley sat, Larry Merchant, Roy Jones, Emmanuel Stewart, George Foreman, Lennox Lewis, Max Kellerman, Harold Letterman. My favorite, I would do this with my brothers. Let's send it over to our unofficial, what would he call him? Unofficial scorekeeper, Harold Letterman. Okay, Jim, 29-28, Gennady Golovkin. You know something, Jim? I tell you, Gennady's jab is, he would just go on. We would do that all the time. It was just absolutely amazing. So thank you very much. That was tremendous. I really, really enjoyed that, and I hope you did as well. And I'm looking forward to that this Saturday.